The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, men and women looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. They built rockets. They walked on the moon. They sent machines to distant planets. And finally, in the year 2087, they were ready to take the greatest step of all. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the ISS Prometheus, humanity's first true starship. She was a tall woman with dark hair cut short and eyes that had seen both the beauty and the danger of space. In 3 days, she would lead her crew beyond the solar system. She would prove that humans belonged among the stars. She never got the chance. The first sign of trouble came at 3:47 inches the morning, Greenwich time. Astronomers across the world noticed something strange. A wave of energy was moving toward Earth at incredible speed. It was not natural. Someone had sent it. Within hours, the wave reached the planet. But it did not strike the surface. Instead, it wrapped around Earth like a blanket. A shimmering barrier of pale blue light covered the entire world, stretching from pole to pole. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And it was a cage. Every satellite went dark. Every rocket that tried to launch crashed back to the ground. Radio signals could not pass through the barrier. Humanity was cut off from the universe in a single moment. The panic was immediate. Governments demanded answers. Scientists worked around the clock. Religious leaders spoke of signs and wonders. The world held its breath and waited. They did not wait long. On the third day, the visitors arrived. They came in ships of silver and gold, descending through the barrier as if it was not there. They were tall and thin, with skin like polished marble and eyes that glowed with soft light. They called themselves the Velanthari, and they brought a message. High Arbiter Thelios was their leader. He was ancient beyond human understanding, having lived for more than 10,000 years. He had seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. He had watched species destroy themselves through war and greed, and he had decided, long ago, that some species needed to be saved from themselves. Humanity was one of those species. Thelios appeared on every screen on Earth. His voice was calm and gentle, like a parent speaking to a frightened child. He explained that the Velanthari were part of a great consortium of 12 spacefaring races. They had watched humanity for a very long time. They had seen the wars, the weapons, the endless hunger for more. But that was not why they had come. Something terrible was moving through the galaxy. Thelios called them the Harokin. They were not a species in the normal sense. They were a hive mind, a swarm of billions of creatures sharing one dark consciousness. They moved from world to world, consuming everything in their path. Not for food, not for resources. They consumed minds. They absorbed thoughts. They erased entire civilizations and added their memories to the swarm. The Harokin had noticed Earth. They were coming. The barrier, Thelios explained, was called the Shroud. It would hide humanity from the Harokin. It would keep them safe until the swarm passed by. This might take 100 years, perhaps 200, but humanity would survive. The Velanthari expected gratitude. They expected tears of relief. They had saved countless species this way. Every time, the protected races had thanked them. Every time, they had accepted their fate with grace. Humans did not. Captain Vasquez watched Thelios speak from her ship, which was now trapped on the ground forever. She listened to his kind words and gentle promises, and she felt something cold settle in her chest. It was not fear. It was anger. She had spent her entire life working toward the stars. Her parents had sacrificed everything to give her an education. Her crew had trained for years. Humanity had dreamed for centuries. And now, in a single moment, strangers from another world had decided that those dreams did not matter. Vasquez was not the only one who felt this way. Dr. Kofi Asante was a xenolinguist who worked at a university in Accra. He had spent his career preparing for the day humanity would meet aliens. He had created theories about how to communicate with other species. He had dreamed of being the first to speak with visitors from the stars. Now those visitors had arrived, and they had come as jailers. Asante did not protest. He did not march in the streets like millions of others. Instead, he sat quietly in his office and began to listen. The Velanthari communicated with each other constantly, and their signals were everywhere. Most people ignored them. Asante recorded them. Night after night, he worked to understand the alien language. It was complex, built on mathematical patterns that human languages did not use. But Asante was patient, he was brilliant, and he was very, very angry. Weeks passed. The world slowly adjusted to its new reality. The Velanthari established orbital stations above every continent. They sent down food and medicine. They offered technology that could cure diseases and clean polluted water. They were generous and kind and utterly convinced that they knew what was best. Some humans accepted this. They were grateful for the gifts. They told themselves that a century or two was not so long. Their grandchildren would see the stars, even if they could not. Others could not accept it. Resistance movements formed in secret. Protests turned violent in some cities. The Velanthari responded with gentle force, using weapons that stunned but did not kill. They were patient with their prisoners. They had done this many times before. Captain Vasquez gathered people around her. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, dreamers. They met in secret, communicating through methods the Velanthari did not monitor. They called their network Prometheus, Unchained, after the ship that would never fly. They had no weapons that could threaten the aliens. They had no way to break through the shroud. They had nothing but their minds and their determination. Vasquez told them that it was enough. Meanwhile, the Velanthari watched with growing confusion. Other species had resisted at first. That was normal. But they always gave up eventually. They always accepted their protection. Humans did not seem to be following this pattern. Thelios dismissed the concerns of his advisors. Humans were young, he said. They were emotional and irrational. They would calm down in time. They would see that the consortium acted out of love. One of his observers disagreed. This Velanthari had no name that humans could pronounce, so the files called it simply the Watcher. It had studied humans more closely than any other member of the consortium. It had read their history. It had watched their wars. It had seen what they did when they were cornered. The Watcher sent a private message to Thelios. It said only this: "We have made a terrible mistake." Thelios deleted the message without reading it. Far below, in the darkness beneath the Atacama Desert, Captain Vasquez stood before a group of the finest minds humanity had ever produced. They looked tired. They looked scared. They looked at her with desperate hope. She did not promise them easy victory. She did not tell them everything would be fine. She told them the truth. The aliens thought humans were weak. The aliens thought humans would surrender. The aliens thought they could cage a species that had clawed its way up from the mud, survived ice ages and plagues and wars, and never once stopped reaching for the stars. The aliens were wrong. Vasquez looked at her people and spoke the words that would change everything. They locked us in a cage. Now we're going to show them what caged animals do. The work began that night. 6 months had passed since the shroud fell over Earth. The world had changed in ways both visible and invisible. On the surface, life continued. People went to work. Children attended school. Farmers grew crops, and factories produced goods. The Velanthari had made sure that humanity would not suffer inside their cage. They provided clean energy. They shared medical technology that cured diseases humans had fought for centuries. In many ways, life was better than before. But beneath the calm surface, something dangerous was growing. Dr. Kofi Asante had not slept properly in months. His small apartment in Accra was filled with papers and screens, all covered in strange symbols. He had cracked the Velanthari language. Every word, every grammar rule, every hidden meaning was now clear to him. What he found in their communications made his blood run cold. The Velanthari were not telling humanity the full truth. Yes, the Harokin were real. Yes, they consumed civilizations. But humans were not prey to the swarm. They were something far more dangerous. Asante discovered this in a classified report that the Velanthari had shared among themselves. The report was old, written thousands of years ago after the consortium first observed Earth. It described human neural patterns, the way human brains worked. To the Harokin, who absorbed minds and added them to their collective, most species were like drops of water falling into an ocean. They merged smoothly and became part of the whole. Human minds were different. Human minds were chaotic. They were filled with contradictions and emotions and wild creativity. They did not merge with the Harokin. They infected them. The few times the swarm had tried to absorb human-like species, the results had been catastrophic. The hive mind had fractured. Billions of creatures had torn themselves apart. Humans were not prey. Humans were poison. And that was exactly why the Velanthari had caged them. The consortium did not fear that humans would be consumed. They feared what would happen if humans reached the stars. They feared what would happen if humans met the Harokin in open battle. They feared that humanity would destroy the swarm and then turn that same terrible power on the rest of the galaxy. The shroud was not protection. It was containment. Asante brought this information to Captain Vasquez. She read the translated documents in silence. When she finished, she looked up with fire in her eyes. "They think we're monsters," she said. "They think we could become monsters," Asante corrected. "There is a difference." Vasquez shook her head. "There is no difference. They decided what we are without asking us. They built a prison around our world because they were afraid of what we might do. Not what we had done, what we might do." She stood and walked to a window. Outside, the night sky was covered by the faint shimmer of the shroud. The stars were still there, but they seemed further away than ever. "We need to get this information out," she said. "Everyone needs to know the truth." But spreading the truth was not easy. The Velanthari monitored most human communications. They could not read minds, but they had technology that tracked electronic signals across the planet. The Prometheus Unchained network was hidden, but it was small. Reaching the whole world seemed impossible. Then the Watcher made contact. The message arrived through a channel that should not have existed. It was encoded in a way that only Asante could read. The sender identified itself as a member of the consortium who disagreed with the Shroud Protocol. The Watcher had been studying humanity for over 200 years. It had watched humans fight wars and make peace. It had seen them create great art and commit terrible crimes. And it had come to a conclusion that none of its fellow Velanthari shared. Humans deserved a choice. The first meeting was held in absolute secrecy. Vasquez and Asante traveled to a remote location in the Andes Mountains. The Watcher appeared as a hologram, its marble white face showing no emotion. "I cannot free your world," it said. "The shroud is controlled by the consortium. Not by me, but I can give you information. I can show you how our technology works." Vasquez studied the alien with suspicion. "Why would you help us?" "Because what my people have done is wrong. We decided your fate without your consent. We treat you like animals in a preserve, protecting you from dangers you never asked to be protected from. This is not justice. This is arrogance." Asante stepped forward. "The reports say we are dangerous. They say our minds could destroy the Harokin. Is this true?" The Watcher was silent for a long moment. "Yes. Your species is unique in the galaxy. Your thoughts are turbulent, beautiful and terrible at the same time. The Harokin cannot absorb you without being torn apart from within. This is why the consortium fears you." "And if we could control that power?" Vasquez asked. "If we could use it as a weapon? Then nothing in the galaxy could stand against you." The alliance was formed that night. The Watcher began sending classified files through hidden channels, schematics for Velanthari technology, maps of the consortium's territory, everything Asante needed to understand the cage that surrounded Earth. The most important discovery came 3 weeks later. The shroud was not powered by some distant generator. It drew its energy from Earth itself, from the planet's own magnetic field. The Velanthari had turned humanity's home into the battery for their prison. Vasquez saw the opportunity immediately. If they could tap into that energy flow, they could redirect it. They could not break the shroud, but perhaps they could change it. The plan was given a name, Project Icarus, named after the figure from human myth who flew too close to the sun. It was a reminder of both ambition and caution. They would reach for the impossible, but they would not let their hunger for freedom blind them to the risks. Work began in secret locations around the world. The Atacama facility was the largest, hidden beneath the desert where Velanthari sensors could not reach. But there were others. A lab in the Swiss Alps, a bunker beneath the Sahara, a submarine base in the Pacific. Humanity had become very good at hiding. The greatest challenge was coordination. The plan required precise timing across every continent. Thousands of devices needed to activate at the same moment. One mistake could ruin everything. So humanity did what it had always done. It talked. It argued. It competed and cooperated at the same time. Nations that had been enemies for generations now shared resources. Scientists who had fought over funding now worked side by side. The cage had done something that centuries of diplomacy could not. It had united the human race. The Velanthari noticed the change. They saw that protests had stopped. They saw that humans were suddenly cooperative and calm. Thelios believed this meant acceptance. His advisors celebrated the success of the Shroud Protocol. The Watcher knew better. It had seen this pattern in human history before. The quiet before the storm. The moment when enemies stopped fighting each other and turned to face a common threat. It sent another warning to Helios. Once again, the High Arbiter ignored it. Months turned into years. Project Icarus grew from a desperate idea into a functioning system. Thousands of devices were built and hidden across the planet. They looked like agricultural drones, weather monitors, and communication satellites. The Velanthari inspected them and saw nothing suspicious. Captain Vasquez watched her people work with growing pride. They had started with nothing but anger and determination. Now they had a weapon. Not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of transformation. The Shroud would not fall. It would change. And when it did, the galaxy would learn what happened when you tried to cage humanity. In her quarters late at night, Vasquez sometimes allowed herself to doubt. The plan was complex. So many things could go wrong. And even if they succeeded, what then? The Herokin were still out there. The consortium had ships and weapons beyond anything humans possessed. But then she would remember why they were fighting. Not for revenge, not for conquest. For the simple right to choose their own destiny. For the chance to fail or succeed on their own terms. That was worth any risk. As the second anniversary of the Shroud approached, Asante brought her the final piece of the puzzle. He had figured out how to weaponize human thought itself. The chaotic patterns of human consciousness could be broadcast like a signal. If aimed at the Herokin, it would tear their hive mind apart. The aliens had been right to fear humanity. They had just been wrong about what to do with that fear. Vasquez looked at the equations on Asante's screen. She did not understand the mathematics, but she understood what it meant. "We're not prisoners anymore," she said quietly. "We're the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. They just don't know it yet." Asante nodded. "When do we show them?" Vasquez smiled. It was not a kind smile. Soon. 2 years had passed since the Shroud wrapped around Earth. To the Velanthari, everything was going according to plan. Humanity had calmed down. The protests had ended. The protected species was accepting its fate, just like all the others before it. They could not have been more wrong. Deep in the cold darkness beyond Neptune, something stirred. The Herokin swarm had been traveling toward Earth for decades, moving through the void between stars like a dark cloud. Billions of creatures, all sharing one mind, all hungry for new thoughts to consume. The swarm's advanced scouts reached the edge of the solar system first. They were small things, no larger than dogs, but they carried the full awareness of the hive mind. Through their eyes, the collective saw the blue world wrapped in its protective barrier. Through their senses, they reached toward the minds trapped inside. What they felt made them stop. The Herokin had consumed thousands of species across millions of years. They had absorbed the thoughts of poets and warriors, scientists and artists. Every mind they touched became part of the whole, adding to the swarm's vast intelligence. But the minds behind the Shroud were different. They burned. They raged. They contradicted themselves in ways that made no sense. Love and hate existed together. Creation and destruction walked hand in hand. Every single mind was a storm, and together they formed a hurricane that the swarm could not comprehend. For the first time in their ancient existence, the Herokin felt something new. They felt fear. The swarm pulled back. The scouts retreated to the main fleet, which waited near the orbit of distant Pluto. The collective debated within itself, billions of voices arguing over what to do. Some parts wanted to consume Earth anyway, believing they could survive the chaos. Others wanted to flee entirely. High Arbiter Helios received reports of the swarm's hesitation with great satisfaction. The Shroud was working perfectly. The Herokin could not break through, and they were confused by what they sensed inside. Soon they would move on to easier prey. He sent a message to his fellow consortium leaders celebrating this success. Another species had been saved through the wisdom of the Velanthari. On Earth, Captain Vasquez received very different news. The Watcher had been monitoring the Herokin from the beginning. It knew what the swarm felt when they touched human consciousness, and it knew what this meant for the plan. "They are afraid of you," the Watcher reported through their secret channel. "Even through the Shroud, even with the barrier blocking their access, they can sense what you are. They will not attack." Vasquez sat in the underground command center beneath the Atacama Desert. Around her, screens showed the status of Project Icarus. Thousands of devices waited around the world, ready to activate. If they won't attack, why do we need to act at all? Asked one of her advisors. Let them leave. We can work on breaking the shroud later. Vasquez shook her head. Because the consortium will never let us out. They're not just protecting us from the Harokin. They're protecting the galaxy from us. As long as they control the shroud, we're prisoners. Dr. Asante spoke up from his station. There's another problem. The swarm learns. Every species they encounter teaches them something new. Right now, they're afraid, but if they have time to think, they might find a way to adapt. How long? Vasquez asked. I don't know. Years. Maybe decades. But eventually, they will come back. And when they do, they will be ready for us. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. They could not wait for the Harokin to attack. They could not wait for the consortium to release them. They had to act now, while they still had the advantage of surprise. The final preparations began immediately. Around the world, the hidden network of Project Icarus came to life. Engineers ran final checks on every device. Scientists calculated exact timing down to the millisecond. Soldiers prepared for the possibility that everything would go wrong. Vasquez knew they were not ready. Not completely. There were still gaps in their understanding of Velanthari technology. There were still risks they could not predict. But they were out of time. She gathered her command staff for a final meeting. They sat around a simple table in a room carved from solid rock. These were the people who had built humanity's hope from nothing. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, dreamers. The best Earth had to offer. In 48 hours we activate Project Icarus, Vasquez said. The shroud will not fall. It will change. Instead of trapping us inside, it will trap the Velanthari with us. Their entire fleet, every ship in orbit, will suddenly find itself in our territory. And then? Asked General Morrison, who had once commanded armies and now commanded the military side of the resistance. Then we talk. We show them that we are not animals to be caged. We show them that we understand their technology, their language, and their secrets. We show them that trying to contain humanity was the biggest mistake they ever made. Asante raised a concern. The Harokin are still watching. When the shroud changes, they will know something has happened. They might see it as an opportunity. That's where the second part of the plan comes in, Vasquez said. We send them a message they will never forget. She explained what Asante had created. A way to broadcast human consciousness like a signal. Not just the chaos of a few minds, but the full storm of human experience. Music, art, dreams, nightmares, love, rage, everything that made humans what they were, concentrated into a single transmission. If they try to absorb it, they will tear themselves apart, Asante said. And even if they don't, they will understand what we are. They will know that Earth is not prey. It is poison. General Morrison looked concerned. We're turning ourselves into a weapon. Some might say we're proving the consortium right. Maybe we are too dangerous for the galaxy. Vasquez met his eyes. The consortium didn't cage us because we were dangerous. They caged us because we might become dangerous. There's a difference. We never got the chance to prove what kind of species we could be. They decided for us. She stood and walked to a screen showing Earth from space, the shroud glowing around it like a second atmosphere. Tomorrow, we decide for ourselves. Whatever we become, good or bad, kind or cruel, it will be our choice. That's all I've ever wanted. The right to choose. The meeting ended. Everyone returned to their posts. Across the world, billions of people went about their lives, unaware that everything was about to change. Only a few hundred knew the truth. They carried the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. The Watcher sent one final message that night. It had done everything it could to help humanity. Now it had to choose its own path. I have been watching your species for 2 centuries, the message read. I have seen your cruelty and your kindness. I have seen your wars and your peace. I have seen you destroy and create in equal measure. I do not know what you will become when you are free, but I believe you deserve the chance to find out. Whatever happens tomorrow, I am proud to have known you. Vasquez read the message alone in her quarters. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The shroud falling over Earth, the lies she had uncovered, the alliance she had built, the weapons she had created. In a few hours, she would press a button, and the galaxy would learn what happened when you tried to cage humanity. She was afraid. Anyone would be. But beneath the fear was something stronger. Hope. Defiance. The stubborn refusal to accept a fate chosen by others. She went to bed and, for the first time in months, she slept peacefully. When she woke, the final day had begun. The countdown started. Project Icarus hummed to life around the world. Thousands of devices powered up in perfect synchronization. The Velanthari, watching from their orbital stations, saw nothing unusual. Just another quiet day on their protected planet. They had no idea that the quiet was about to end. Captain Vasquez took her position in the command center. Asante sat at his station, ready to transmit the human signal. General Morrison stood with soldiers who hoped they would never have to fight. All stations report ready, Asante said. Vasquez looked at the screen. The countdown reached its final seconds. May we be worthy of this moment, she whispered. The button was pressed, and everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday. High Arbiter Thelios was in his private chambers aboard the Consortium flagship, reviewing reports from other protected worlds. Everything was calm. Everything was according to plan. The Harokin swarm remained at the edge of the solar system, too confused to attack. Humanity was quiet and cooperative. Another successful containment. Then every screen on his ship went dark. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. Then the screens came back to life. Every single one displayed the same message, written in perfect High Velanthari script. The language was flawless. The grammar was correct. The meaning was unmistakable. Thank you for the cage. We have redecorated. Thelios stared at the words, unable to process what he was seeing. Humans could not write in Velanthari. Humans could not hack consortium systems. Humans were primitives, barely more advanced than the animals they had once been. Alarms began to scream across every ship in orbit. On Earth's surface, thousands of devices activated simultaneously. They drew power from the planet's magnetic field, just as the shroud did. But instead of maintaining the barrier, they twisted it. They changed its direction. The shroud did not fall. It inverted. The barrier that had surrounded Earth now surrounded the Velanthari fleet. 12 massive carrier ships, 40,000 soldiers and workers. The entire force that had held humanity prisoner for nearly 4 years. All of them were now trapped inside a cage of their own making. Captain Vasquez watched the transformation from her command center. The screens showed the chaos in orbit. Velanthari ships tried to move, but the inverted shroud held them in place. They fired weapons at the barrier, but the energy was absorbed harmlessly. They sent signals to the consortium, begging for help, but nothing could pass through. Transmission ready, Asante reported, broadcasting on all frequencies. Vasquez nodded. Send it. Her voice went out to the stars. It was the first human signal to leave Earth in almost 4 years. It was clear and calm and carried a message that would be remembered for centuries. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. To all species who can hear this, humanity is no longer imprisoned. We have taken control of the barrier that surrounded our world. We hold the Velanthari fleet. We mean no harm to anyone who means no harm to us. But we will no longer be caged. We will no longer be protected. We will no longer be told what we can and cannot become. We are coming out. Get out of our way. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. It reached consortium outposts within hours. It reached the Harokin swarm within minutes. The swarm's reaction was immediate. Having watched the transformation of the shroud, the collective intelligence of the Harokin decided that Earth was now vulnerable. The barrier was focused on the Velanthari fleet. The planet below was exposed. Surely, this was the moment to strike. 1 billion creatures turned toward Earth and began to advance. Vasquez saw them coming on her screens. Sensors showed the vast cloud of the swarm moving inward, crossing the orbit of Neptune, approaching faster than any natural object could move. They took the bait, she said. Asante's hands moved across his console, activating the Prometheus signal. What happened next would become legend. The broadcast towers that had been hidden across Earth for 2 years suddenly activated. They sent out a concentrated burst of human consciousness, amplified 1,000,000 times. Every dream humanity had ever dreamed, every song ever sung, every tear ever cried, every laugh, every scream, every whisper of love and roar of rage, the full weight of human experience, compressed into a single transmission aimed directly at the Harokin swarm. The effect was immediate and devastating. The creatures at the front of the swarm simply stopped. Their small bodies hung motionless in space. Inside the hive mind, chaos erupted. Human thoughts crashed through their collective like a tidal wave. The contradiction in creativity, the endless argument of human consciousness, tore at the bonds that held the swarm together. The Herokin did not retreat. They fled. They scattered in every direction. Billions of creatures suddenly alone, their connection to each other shattered by the beautiful, terrible storm of human thought. Some attacked each other. Some simply floated, empty and lost. The vast intelligence that had consumed civilizations for 1 billion years was broken in seconds. The survivors fled toward the outer edges of the solar system. They did not look back. On the Velanthari flagship, High Arbiter Thelios watched in horror. He had seen the Herokin destroy entire species. He had seen them consume worlds. He had never seen anything hurt them. He had never imagined anything could. The humans had done it with a thought. A communication request appeared on his screen. He accepted it without thinking. Captain Vasquez looked out at him from the display. She was standing in a room of stone and steel, surrounded by human soldiers. She did not look angry. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired but determined. High Arbiter Thelios, she said. You have questions? Thelios struggled to find words. How? How did you do this? The shroud was unbreakable. Your technology was centuries behind ours. This should not be possible. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. You locked us in a room with nothing but time and spite. What did you think would happen? We were trying to protect you. No, you were trying to protect yourselves. From us. We found the classified reports. We know why you really built the shroud. You were afraid of what we might become. Thelios fell silent. There was nothing to say. The human was right. Your fears were not completely wrong, Vasquez continued. Humans can be dangerous. We have done terrible things to each other throughout our history. But we have also done wonderful things. We have created beauty and knowledge and love. You never gave us the chance to show you which path we would choose. You decided for us. The alien's glowing eyes dimmed with something that might have been shame. And now? Now that you have defeated us? Now that you have broken the greatest threat in the galaxy? What will you do? Vasquez did not answer immediately. She turned to look at something off-screen, then turned back. We will do what we always do. We will choose. Some humans will want revenge. Some will want conquest. Others will want peace. We will argue and debate and eventually decide together. That is how humans work. Messy and complicated and slow, but at least it will be our choice. She stepped closer to the screen. Your fleet is trapped, but your people are not harmed. We have no interest in killing. We want to negotiate. We want to join the galaxy as equals, not as prisoners or conquerors. But that depends on you. What do you want? Release the other protected species. Every world you have caged because you feared what they might become. Give them the same choice you denied us. Let them succeed or fail on their own terms. Thelios was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head. I will speak to the consortium. I make no promises, but I will try. That's all we ask. The communication ended. Vasquez stood alone for a moment, letting the weight of what had happened settle over her. They had done it. Against all odds. Against an enemy with superior technology and thousands of years of experience. Humanity had won. But she knew this was only the beginning. Dr. Asante approached her. He looked exhausted but happy. The Herokin swarm is scattered. Reports suggest some fragments are fleeing the solar system entirely. Others are drifting, disconnected from each other. They may never reform. And the Velanthari? Confused, frightened. But their fleet is intact and their people are unharmed. They know we could have destroyed them. They know we chose not to. Vasquez nodded. Good. That matters. How we win matters just as much as winning. She walked out of the command center and climbed the stairs to the surface. The Atacama Desert stretched out around her, dry and empty under a blue sky. But the sky looked different now. The shimmer of the shroud was gone from above. For the first time in almost 4 years, the stars were visible even in daylight to those who knew where to look. She thought about all the humans who had dreamed of reaching those stars. The scientists and explorers and dreamers who had never given up hope. They had been right. Humanity belonged out there. And now, finally, they were going. 10 years had passed since humanity broke free from the shroud. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible to anyone who had lived before that day. The Velanthari Consortium still existed. The 12-member species still traded and cooperated and governed their corner of space. But they no longer spoke of protecting younger civilizations. They no longer built cages around worlds they feared. The lesson they had learned from humanity was too painful to forget. High Arbiter Thelios had resigned from his position a year after the liberation. He spent his final decades writing about his mistakes, trying to explain to future generations why the Shroud Protocol had failed. His memoirs became required reading across the consortium. The conclusion was simple. You cannot decide the fate of others, no matter how wise you believe yourself to be. Every species deserves the chance to make its own choices, for good or ill. Earth became the center of something new. They called it the Terran Accord. It began with humanity, but it did not end there. Other species came to join. Some were former protected worlds that the consortium had caged and abandoned. Others were new civilizations that had watched humanity's rise and wanted to be part of something different. The Accord was not an empire. Humanity had learned from its own history that empires always fell. Instead, it was an alliance built on simple principles. Every member species was equal. Every world governed itself. And no one would ever be caged again. Captain Elena Vasquez, now Fleet Admiral of the Terran Defense Force, stood on the bridge of the TDF Prometheus. The ship that had once been grounded on Earth, the ship that had been meant to take humanity to the stars before the Shroud fell, had finally been completed. It was the flagship of humanity's first interstellar fleet. The bridge was filled with officers from a dozen species. Humans worked alongside Velanthari who had defected to the Accord. Engineers from worlds humanity had never heard of before. Liberation monitored systems built with technology from across the galaxy. The Prometheus was a symbol of what the Accord stood for. Different species, working together by choice. Admiral Vasquez looked out at the stars through the main view screen. They were preparing for a mission to the Galactic Rim, where reports suggested something strange was happening. Deep space sensors had detected unusual energy patterns. Some believed it was the Herokin, regrouping after their defeat. Others thought it was something entirely new. Whatever it was, humanity would face it. They were no longer prisoners watching the stars from behind a barrier. They were explorers, venturing into the unknown. Dr. Kofi Asante walked onto the bridge. He was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with years. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still brilliant. He had spent the past decade teaching at the New Geneva Academy, training the next generation of xenolinguists and diplomats who would represent humanity among the stars. "You look thoughtful," he said, standing beside Vasquez. "I'm thinking about how far we've come. 10 years ago, we were trapped on Earth with no hope of escape. Now we have a fleet, allies, and a seat at the galactic table. It still doesn't seem real sometimes." Asante smiled. "Reality often exceeds our imagination. That is one of humanity's greatest strengths. We dream of impossible things, and then we make them happen. We also have a talent for making new enemies," Vasquez said. "The Herokin are still out there. The consortium may have changed, but not everyone in it is happy about what we've done. And now there are strange signals from the Rim. Yes, but there are also new friends, new discoveries, new opportunities. The universe is vast, Elena. It contains multitudes. As one of our poets once said, we cannot control what comes. We can only choose how to meet it." Vasquez nodded. She thought about all the people who had made this moment possible. The engineers who had built the hidden devices of Project Icarus, the soldiers who had prepared for battles they hoped would never come, the ordinary people across Earth who had refused to accept that their cage was permanent. And she thought about the Watcher. The mysterious Velanthari who had helped humanity had accepted asylum on Earth after the liberation. It lived quietly now, studying human culture and writing papers that few people read. When Vasquez visited occasionally, the Watcher always said the same thing. Watching humanity's journey was the greatest privilege of its long life. A young officer approached the Admiral. "Fleet is ready, ma'am. All ships report green. We can depart on your command." Vasquez turned to face the view screen. The Prometheus and its escort fleet hung in space above Earth. Below them, the planet turned slowly, blue and green and beautiful. 8 billion people lived there now, and millions more had spread to colonies across the solar system. They were no longer trapped. They were thriving. "Send a message to all ships," Vasquez said. "We depart in 5 minutes. Destination, the Galactic Rim. Mission, Investigate unknown signals. Objective: protect the Accord and make first contact if possible. She paused, then added, and remind everyone of our principles. We do not fire first. We do not judge before we understand. We meet the unknown with open hands, not closed fists. That is what separates us from those who caged us. The message went out. Across the fleet, crews prepared for the jump to faster than light speeds. Engineers ran final checks. Officers reviewed mission parameters. Everyone knew this could be dangerous, but everyone also knew that danger had never stopped humanity before. Asante moved to leave the bridge, returning to his quarters to prepare his own research for the journey ahead. But he stopped at the door and looked back. You know what I find most remarkable about humans? He said. Vasquez turned. Tell me. Every species in the galaxy has survival instincts. Every species will fight when cornered. But humans do more than survive. They grow. They learn. They become better. Not always. Not everyone. But enough. Always enough. You've been studying us for too long, Kofi. You're starting to sound like the Watcher. Asante laughed. Perhaps. But the Watcher was right about us, wasn't it? It believed we deserved a chance to choose our own path. And look what we chose. Not revenge. Not conquest. Partnership. Exploration. Growth. We proved that their fears were wrong. Vasquez thought about this. It was true. Humanity could have used the power of the Prometheus signal to destroy the Velanthari. They could have conquered the weakened consortium. Some humans had wanted exactly that. But in the end, the voices of cooperation had won. We're not perfect, she said. We still make mistakes. There are still humans who want power at any cost, who see others as enemies to be defeated. We have to watch ourselves as carefully as we watch the stars. Of course, no species is perfect. But you know what makes the difference? We try. We recognize our flaws and we work to overcome them. That's all anyone can do. The door closed behind him. Vasquez turned back to the view screen. All ships, prepare for jump, she ordered. The fleet hummed with power. Stars stretched and blurred as the ships accelerated beyond light speed. Earth shrank behind them until it was just another dot of light among billions. Ahead lay the unknown. Perhaps the Harokin had returned, evolved and ready for revenge. Perhaps something else entirely waited for them. Whatever it was, humanity would face it the way they had faced every challenge in their history. Together, stubbornly, refusing to give up or give in, Vasquez allowed herself a moment of pure joy. This was what she had dreamed of when she was a young pilot, looking up at the stars from Earth's surface. This was what the cage had tried to take from humanity. This was what they had fought so hard to reclaim. Freedom. The freedom to explore, to discover, to make mistakes and learn from them, to choose their own destiny. She thought of all the generations of humans who had come before, the first ones who looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there, the explorers who crossed oceans and continents, the scientists who unlocked the secrets of nature, the dreamers who refused to accept limits. They had all led to this moment, and this moment would lead to countless more. The Prometheus sailed through the vast darkness between stars, carrying humanity's hopes into the unknown. Vasquez spoke quietly, to no one in particular. They tried to protect Earth. They tried to cage us for our own good. They thought they knew what was best. She smiled. They were wrong. The stars rushed by, and humanity's journey continued.